something happened there that they don't know, but now here's the evidence. It got struck. That's why the geology changed that area and put indentation in.
So you're saying it got struck by
It
the
got.
ice did, right?
This
At
is
that
what
time.
caused the flood in the Bible.
Okay.
Same thing.
Yeah.
It got hit right here. It ejected stuff as evidence. Okay, 12,800 years ago. This it created so much energy and heat that we had two huge ice lakes up here, fractured, and that's how you get all of those. Randall Carlson talks about all those. Okay.
Yeah, like in Missoula.
Missoula flood areas
yeah,
that we have, you see all those ripples. The only thing that caused that, and what would have caused it if this had created so much energy, because 1 mile high of ice, you realize this is only a few hundred feet high.
Mm-hmm.
A mile high of ice, which would be from.
You can't really fathom that.
Well,
right?
it's the height. It's the height of Mount Wilson.
Right.
Of ice, okay, and most likely a block or a craggly thing flying through the air 800 miles. The energy to do that, hitting into the surface here, would create so much heat that all the excess ice there, not only would the heat melt most of the ice, and then it blowing off and coming down on every other area here would completely devastate that ice pack. Okay? The amount of concussive energy would fracture all those glaciers. It would.
Yeah.
Okay. It shook down those cyclopean walls down here. Down here in Peru. That impact shook down those cyclopean walls that the Incans are supposedly the ones that built the ones.
Yeah.
It shook those down. It put so much heat in the atmosphere that the glaciers that were there at one time, they melted, and they raised the water level so high up in the Andean lakes that was unbelievable. So when the recovery came about, we had higher levels, but with all that water sitting up in these shallows, the earth tipped. It compressed, and we've seen that happen when the ice sheets retract. The ground level raises because it's being compressed down, so it raises up.
So all of that is consequence from
all the
from
ice was
impact.
here, and the lakes were under here, and as it melted, quickly it filled this up so much it went over a few hundred years,
Right.
but it left this line up here. 800 feet above the present level of Lake Titicaca was the line up here of the old lake. Okay, but that lake line is tipped now. That means that lake was so heavy that it compressed the geography of the earth and tipped it at an angle. And when it did that, it started draining out that thing to the present day when the Incans came to the present day levels, which is taller than it is now. Because the climate was different. They were able to produce up in Lake Titicaca, which is over 10,000 feet. They were able to produce rice and
all
other
of these
stuff.
Civilizations were around the same time, right? Like 12.
Well,
years.
we won't talk about this. We won't talk about what civilizations were there, because nobody's going to admit they were. Even though the evidence from Peru, from India, from Lebanon at Baalbek, where they have a 200-ton stone in a wall 20 feet high on the top of two other 100-ton stones. And they said it's a Roman temple, of course, built above it. And they say the Romans did that. I've seen the aqueducts that are built by the Romans. I've physically been on them. I've run across them. Nothing suggests that they had the ability to manipulate a 20 to 50-ton stone, because the obelisks that they tried to get back from Egypt, half of them when they broke. Explain that. If they were able to be created and moved perfectly, but now as all the...
And what's an obelisk?
That's the 120-foot granite fucking obelisk is what? It's just a straight up and down beam. That's an obelisk. Let's see, we have one in the, what do you call it, memorial, the Washington Memorial out there at the end of the lake.
Oh,
obelisk.
yeah. Okay,
that's an obelisk. Okay. They're made out of solid granite. Okay, and most of them fell over but didn't break. But they tried then to lift them up, move them, and they crack them.
Yeah.
Okay, So we don't know who made these obelisks, but they were all made, and every civilization coming along said that it's ours. And they built temples around this shit, and they try and re-erect them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just like if you, okay, here's one thing. You know the Sphinx, right?
Yeah.
If you look between the legs of the Sphinx on the stela, there's two Sphinxes in Egypt facing. One's facing east, one's facing west. There's only one facing east still. Where's the one facing west?
There was another Sphinx?
That's what all the carvings indicate. The Sphinx ushered in the sunrise, and the Sphinx ushered out the sunrise, according to the stela.
What's the stela?
That's the engravings that are inside of the Sphinx legs when you get up to his chest, the stela here.
Okay.
Whether or not that stela was produced in the time, because nothing is written about the Sphinx except in the Egyptian time. So that stela most likely was created by the Egyptians. But the Egyptians indicated there's a second Sphinx facing west.
I assume nobody talks about that?
Well, I just heard about it, and it's like, wow, that's some interesting stuff, because I haven't been to Egypt. I'd like to, but I haven't seen the two things and been interpreted that this means the rising sun and the setting sun.
Yeah.
That indicates that there's two Sphinxes. Where is it? We've really never looked, and it could have been torn down, because if you look at the fragility of that first Sphinx, the first Sphinx had to be redone several times. Okay, rebuilt, and the Egyptians did it. It's like, Menkaure built the Sphinx, and then he repaired it. Wait a minute. The same guy that built it repaired it? What the fuck is that about? Aren't these things like the pyramids supposed to last forever? Yeah, that's exactly why Menkaure did not build the Sphinx. He found the Sphinx and repaired it. The claws and stuff were deteriorated. Now, if you look at the Sphinx from logistics, how it sits and everything, and then you look at the dimensions, you go, wait a minute. It's perfect. And yet it's not perfect. It lines perfectly up with the sunrise, right? And that which doesn't changes. The constellations changed at 11,800 years ago, about to 15,000 years ago. If you would have lined the constellations up, it would have been in Taurus that it is today. It would have been Leo. What is Leo? The constellation for the lion or the Sphinx. So that's a lion that's facing, yes. Why does it have the head of a fucking Egyptian? And how come the head is so much smaller in proportion to the body? Because the lion head was recarved down to look like the pharaoh's head. So he could claim glory of being the one rising in the sun.
Now,